Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Saturday. How we all doing today? See a couple people in chat. We'll just kind of hang out for a little bit and let people filter in.
Sorry, guys. I was just chewing on a homemade beignet that my wife made.
Josh is munching
I,
on goodies.
I think it had something. I think it has something to do with Disney. I think you can get them there or something like that.
Oh
Adam, you
yeah,
know anything
yeah,
about that?
yeah. You can get them
Yeah.
there. French Quarter, I think,
hmm
and I think at some of the parks they have beignets now.
Yes. So I was treated to some of those today by my wonderful wife.
Yep. Speaking of Disney, Disney Springs will be reopening on the 20th.
Yes, that is great news, and it's.
Shanghai is opening this week, I think, or are they already open?
I think they're opening this week.
Yeah, the 11th maybe.
Yeah, the 11th seems like the date, so that would be Monday. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So that's promising.
It is. All right. Let me start recording so I know I'm not cutting anything off. Got too much stuff on my desk. All right. Um. See you in chat.
Yep, I'm there.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm ready to go if you are.
I am ready to go.
All right. Before we jump in too far, let me play this and make sure you can hear it, and then
Okay.
if we want to play it again, I'll play it again, just so I know that you're here and stuff.
Yeah.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Yes, I could hear that.
All right, cool. Awesome. All right, so I'll just go ahead and play it again, and we'll just jump in.
All right.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Hello there, and welcome back to the From a Certain Point of View podcast. This is episode 28. I am Josh.
I'm Adam.
And if you're keeping track at home, we're at about mid May at this point in life. And in Pennsylvania, it's snowing. We're
Yeah,
in a pandemic, and there are murder bees on the loose. But the good news is we still have Star Wars.
yeah, yeah. Let's
So.
let's forget about all that other crazy stuff for a little bit.
So, Adam, what have you been up to in Star Wars this week? How was your May the 4th?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. I watched a little bit of Phantom Menace, and then we watched. You and I hung out. We watched Clone Wars, and then Disney Gallery, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. And then this week as a whole, I finished Black Spire. I've read a good chunk of Alphabet Squadron for the book club, and Alphabet Squadron is incredible. After chapter two is a lot of information, and then after chapter
hmm
two, it's just super good. So I am loving that. Um, so I played a little bit of Battlefront last night. Not a whole
hmm
lot, but just a tiny bit, and that's about it. What do you got? What are you up to?
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to hear that you're enjoying Alphabet Squadron. I did end up buying the Kindle version,
Nice.
um, for like $5. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to be reading
Oh,
it. And
it's a steal for $5. It's
right.
worth every penny of that.
And I really enjoyed our May the 4th celebration. It was great to actually get together with
Yeah.
another human friend and in person and drink blue milk and watch the Mando gallery and
Yep.
Clone Wars.
Yep.
I am currently reading the Kanan comic that you let me
Oh,
borrow.
nice. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. What are you thinking of that?
because I'm really enjoying it so
Yeah,
far,
that's
and
good
it's cool
stuff.
to get some background on that character.
Yep.
Um, I finished up Revenge of the Sith because I was watching that, and I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. That final hour, especially starting with Order 66 and to the point where we see Anakin shed a tear on Mustafar, I believe that is some of the best edited Star Wars that we've ever gotten with John Williams' score and with Order 66 and everything, and this is how
Yeah.
Liberty dies with thunderous applause, all that stuff. I think is just great. And I also watched Solo, and
Okay.
I,
Nice.
that movie is really growing on me. I think
Yeah, it does
I
that to you.
I gained an even better appreciation for Solo after watching Clone Wars because there's a lot of like deep cuts in Solo and
Yes.
references
Yeah,
and that
there
I
are.
appreciated more this time.
Yeah.
And man, I think we need more Star Wars movies like that where
Yeah.
they make them for the hardcore fans too, not just the general audience. Um,
Solo did a good job of
and
walking the line, I think, because there's
hmm
things like you
yeah,
said with Pikes in there, but it's also very accessible because it's just a Han and Chewie story at its heart, which
right,
is very accessible to everybody. But
for sure,
there's
for
those,
sure.
yeah, but there's those things in there that we know and that we kind of geek out about.
hmm No doubt. And I also have been watching Rebels, and
Nice.
kind of going forth, but back and forth between reading the Kanan comic and watching Rebels, and I'm enjoying that. And one final thing is I ordered this shirt from Shop Disney, which I was going to wear today, um, because I
Oh,
love
that's
it.
cool. I like that. That's
However,
a so for everyone listening, it's a white shirt with kind of a black minimalist Mandalorian and Baby Yoda graphic on it. It's really cool.
the problem is I ordered a large and I got a small, so it's
That's not
very, very
right.
tight,
That's not
doesn't
right.
fit, so I got to send it back sadly. So I'm wearing my Yoda best uh, dad ever shirt that
Oh, that's
my
awesome.
wife
Your wife
my
made that.
wife made for
Yeah,
me. Yeah, so but
awesome.
yeah,
So
it's great.
at first, I want to say welcome to everyone in chat. We have a few people hanging out so far. I see Pizza and Parsecs, Mr. Rez, and Stephen Miller. If you guys have been up to anything in Star Wars this week, drop it in chat. Let us know what you've been reading or watching or doing. We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, we'd love to hear how you celebrated May the 4th as well.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and Adam, I was going to go to our poll results, but then I realized I
We didn't
completely
have
forgot
one.
to create a poll for
I
this
thought
week,
about
and
that
that's
last night. I was like, wait, I don't think we have a poll. So-
so I'm going to get back on that for this week.
all
I
right, cool.
apologize to everybody who looks forward to those. Um, Took a little break there unintentionally, but Adam, you're going to tell us what's going on this week's show.
I will. We're going to start off with some news. We got some pretty cool things to talk about in news. Not a very heavy news week, but there's some pretty fun stories nonetheless. And then this episode's going to be like review extravaganza because we're going to catch up on a few things. We have a few new things to talk about this week, but we're going to take a look at the last episode of Clone Wars, Victory and Death, and then we're going to look at both episodes of Disney Gallery, the first one and the second one, which just came out yesterday. So be aware that there will be spoilers if you're behind on any of those. So we're gonna kind of go full discussion mode in those. And we're going to catch up on a more in depth review of the Rise of Skywalker novelization by Ray Carson. So that is episode 28 in a nutshell.
Well, I'm really excited about this episode, Adam. I think we got a review heavy episode, but some cool news to talk about too. So
Yeah.
let's dive into the news.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
So our first piece of news is very exciting. It comes from StarWars.com actually, and I'm just going to read the headline here. It says Academy Award winner Taika Waititi to direct and co-write new Star Wars feature film for theatrical release. Oscar nominee Christy Wilson Carnes or Karen, something like that, to co-write screenplay with Watiti. So, what do you think of this news? And I thought I didn't really notice till now, Adam, that it says theatrical release. So
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
very
yeah.
much
No, his
making that
is.
apparent.
Yep, yep. He is on the movie slate, which is very exciting. Um, I think after Mando Episode 8, which he directed the finale of that first season, I was very on board for more Taika Waititi and Star Wars. So,
Hmm.
uh, very happy to hear that that's definitely on the slate.
For sure. So, I mean, I think, you guys know out there, if you've been listening, that I'm a big fan of Thor Ragnarok. I'm a big fan of Taika Waititi, his balance of, kind of comedy and also, you know, being serious when needed. I think he even says a quote in the gallery Mandalorian documentary about how Star Wars takes itself seriously, but not it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it does take
Hmm.
itself seriously. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I
Yeah,
think he's
yeah,
able to walk that line. Um, and I think he has a good knack for comedy, but also for getting to the heart of the story and everything.
yep,
So I'm excited to see what this might be, when it might happen. We don't know too much just yet, but I was always thinking that he was going to do a movie for Star Wars, and now we have confirmation from StarWars.com.
yeah. And it went
Okay.
very. I was a little surprised that there was a official Star Wars dropping that right off the bat, which was nice. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Usually the
happy.
the other media outlets get it out there, first and everything, but this time
Yeah,
StarWars.com released it themselves, so
yep,
that was refreshing. Um, we have also a couple rumors as far as TV goes, and
yeah,
um, as as you guys are aware, our news now is brought to you by farfarawaynews.com. And the first rumor is Hayden Christensen is rumored to be returning as Anakin Skywalker. Um, and so let's take a look here. This came from LRM Online
yeah.
that
Which
he is
honestly
in.
is not really a site that I know much at
Yeah,
all.
it's not familiar to me at
So
all
I
either.
I'm treading
So
very
we'll take this
carefully on
with
this
a
one.
a very small
Yeah,
grain of salt. Um, according to the site, our source shared with me, this is the quote, our source shared with me that producers are currently in talks with Hayden Christensen to reprise his role as Anakin Skywalker. My guess is that we would see Anakin in some sort of maybe flashback or dream sequence in the Obi-Wan series. Um, Personally, I think it would be great to see Hayden come back as Anakin Skywalker
yeah.
because he's often been criticized as far as his acting
Hmm.
ability goes, and I'd love him to have a
Unfairly,
chance
I
to,
would add.
yeah, unfairly. Um, I'd love him to have an opportunity to be Anakin again, and just kind of, you know,
Yeah, I would love to
for us
see
to
it.
see
I
that.
was really hoping to see it in episode 9. We heard it, but we didn't see it. But I would love to see him in that role again too. But like
Hmm.
I'm taking this one very very wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's definitely just a big old rumor right now.
Yeah,
So
Pizza and Parsecs and chat is the same with that. They said they'd love to see Hayden again, but taking this news with a massive grain of salt.
yeah, I think that's a good way
100%.
to approach it.
Yeah.
We have another what I would consider to be a rumor, even though this came from THR,
Yeah,
the Hollywood Reporter, which
I'm
is
with you on
pretty
that.
reputable.
Yeah.
I'm still a little cautiously optimistic about it. And I might need some help on the name, but Tamura Morrison
Yeah,
who played he played Jango
Django Fett.
Fett
Yep.
in Attack of the Clones, and that he might be returning to play Boba Fett in The Mandalorian season 2,
Yeah.
um, according to the Hollywood Reporter. Um, what do you think about this one?
Um, how in depth do you want me to go with this? Because
As in depth as you want
I
to.
am not excited for Boba Fett at all. 0%.
Yeah.
Um, I'm very excited for Morrison to be back.
Hmm.
I very much hope that he'd be playing Rex or something like that. That's what I would really like to see, since we're rumored to get an Ahsoka appearance anyway,
Hmm.
and Rex is a clone of Django as well,
Yeah.
so that would fit. Plus it's been 15-ish years since he was on screen, so he's aged a little bit. So
Yeah.
I think he could play an older Rex. He'd have to be a good bit older, which is fine. But Boba Fett, I am not excited about. I haven't been excited about Boba Fett for a movie. I am not excited about Boba Fett coming back in Mandalorian. I'm just ready to leave Boba Fett in that pit and let him
Mhm.
stay there, I guess. So,
Yeah, man, I'm actually 100% in agreement with you on this one. I don't need Boba Fett. I mean, he's a cool character and everything, but I never became as obsessed with the character as some Star Wars fans have. But, um, you know, I would much rather see him come back as Rex. And
yeah.
I know Dave Filoni kind of maybe had on his Twitter or something like that some artwork, which was actually from Rebels, I found out. But the artwork was of Ahsoka and Rex kind of
Yeah, but
riding on those
he has a
wolves
tendency
together.
to he has a
But
tendency to
that
put
could
that
have been a
stuff up.
hint.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
he
what I'm
could have.
saying. He has a tendency to put that stuff up at opportune
Right.
moments.
Yeah. So I think that he may have been hinting at,
Yeah,
yeah, we're going
yeah.
to see this pair. And it would be great to see both of them back, especially after we saw where season 7 of the Clone Wars ended with, kind of Rex and Ahsoka. So that's where I'm leaning with this, but we'll
Yep.
we'll see.
Yep, and I think
So,
Chad is with us too. Pizza and Parsec says he could return as a clone, and
hmm
Stephen Miller is saying he could be Rex if Ahsoka's back, and that would be fun. It absolutely would. That's 100% what I'm hoping for.
yeah, same here.
And Mr. Rez said could be all the clones inside my head.
Yeah, there you
So
go. Now, the only thing that I think gives this some credence as far as it being Boba Fett is I forget which episode it was. It was the
5, it was the
Tatooine
gunslinger.
5,
Yeah.
the Tatooine episode, the gunslinger, and we see some character approaching. What was her name? I can't think of it
Um,
right now.
Fennec
I'm gonna
Shand.
need some. Yeah. Um, and we didn't really ever. There was no reveal of who that was. So that's the
No,
only thing
right.
that you know could it be Boba Fett? But yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
we'll have to
yeah,
wait and see.
we'll have to talk about that one day before season 2 comes out. 'Cause there's actually some options for who that might be that doesn't have to be
hmm
Boba Fett.
Yeah, it
You
could
know,
be somebody else.
so.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm not excited for Boba Fett. Radio Rebellion, on the other hand, looks like he's very excited for Boba Fett
Yeah,
because
which is
he's
which is great.
yeah he
Different point of view.
put Boba Fett
I
in
like it.
all caps in chat. So
hmm
looks like he's
Yeah,
pretty
some
excited.
people are. Yeah, there's a lot of
There's a
people
lot
out
of
there that
Boba
are
Fett fans out there, and I'm sure that
very
they
excited,
are like
very excited about this. So
ready for this.
I'm
Is
happy for you if
Yeah,
this is true.
I think they've
Yep.
been waiting for this for years, and if that happens, I'm sure they'll be ready for it. So
Yep, indeed. So we will have to wait and see come October. Hopefully, Mando still releases in October, and we'll find out then. Um, we have some gaming news here as well. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order has a free content update, and there's some more information on EA's website about everything that's
hmm
included in this update. There's something called meditation training, which is the biggest part of the update. It's a new game mode hub that can be accessed from the meditation points found throughout the game. You can face off against different enemies and bosses in 2 different game modes: combat challenges and the battle grid. I
I
haven't gotten into these or anything yet. Adam, I don't know if you've
I
tried
haven't
this
tried
out
it
yet
out
or
yet. I launched it last night just to try it out, but I haven't gotten into
yeah.
the game or anything yet. I'm actually wanting to start a new game plus, so I can keep
hmm
all my lightsaber colors and stuff and just start over from the beginning and
Yeah.
just because I've been wanting to play the whole thing through again, and I bought it this week because it was on sale. Because I actually played it on EA's Origin Access, which it's like a rental type thing, so I didn't actually own
Yeah.
it. Um, so I'm excited to play through it again and try out those meditations. I guess there's new customization options and things like that.
Yeah, there's
So
some new skins and like BD1 skins and different things like that.
yep,
Some new cow um outfits and whatnot.
ponchos.
So
Yep.
yeah, ponchos. If anybody out there in the chat has tried out any of this updated content, let us know what your impressions are.
There was also some, and I didn't highlight this because I feel like we've talked about it a lot, but there was some chatter this week about a Fallen Order sequel. I guess EA mentioned that on a
hmm
call. about that being a new franchise. So it sounds like there's more on the way. It seems like that's a little leaning more towards a confirmation, but like I feel like we've talked about that a lot, so it's not really
Yeah,
new
we haven't. I
news.
think I think there's a lot of potential for that
Yeah,
to happen. So I
yeah,
fully expect it. Fully
yeah.
expect a sequel. All
And
right, Adam, we have one more piece of news, and you're going to take this one, right?
yeah, and
Okay.
finishing off the news this week, Marvel, I believe yesterday, sent out, and as what I understand, this was an email that went to some of the users of their online store, and they are going to be closing that online store. The Marvel Digital Comic Shop will close on June 2nd. Anybody looking to purchase digital Marvel comics, including Star Wars comics, you'll have to do that on your iOS or Android device through the Marvel Comics app. Or you can also continue buying on Comixology, which is where I've been buying anyway. And if you have bought titles on the Marvel Digital Comic Shop, those should transfer over to your Comixology account, so you won't lose the comics that you've already bought. Um, I don't know that I've actually ever bought through Marvel's digital store itself, so this doesn't really affect me, but I'm sure that there are people out there that it does affect. But just so you know that there are, you're not losing your content. You're still going to be able to buy content. You'll just have to do it in a different place. So heads up, that's coming on June 2nd.
Yeah, thanks for filling us in on that. I was thinking about that, and I didn't know if it would. I know you kind of try to access the Marvel Star Wars stuff online
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything, so I didn't know if it would impact you in any way or anything. But
No,
it's
because I've actually been buying on Comixology for a number of years, so I usually just buy
hmm
there anyway, or I wait for it to come out on Marvel Unlimited and read it there. So
right,
it doesn't really affect me that much, but I'm sure that
great.
there are people out there that
It might, yeah.
maybe even caught off guard because that just kind of trickled out a little bit yesterday. So
hmm Well, that wraps it up for our news segment this week, and now we're gonna dive into some reviews. Adam, can you take us to our first review of this week?
Good. The show is about to begin.
okay, Clone Wars, Victory and Death. We finish off Clone Wars, not just season 7, but we finish off Clone Wars, the series as a whole. This is the last episode ever of one of. It's interesting because Clone Wars started off in a pretty rough place and then it ended in a very, very high place. So this has been years in the making, and I'm very happy that Clone Wars ended where it did, because it just kind of put that bookend on the chapter of the Clone Wars. So, but anyway, getting into this episode, Victory and Death. First of all, do you think Ahsoka might be rethinking her idea about letting Maul cause some chaos? Because
Yeah, I mean,
he caused some chaos. Like,
he did, and I think maybe the worst result of her letting him loose was the fact that he got away, and um, now he'll be heavily involved with Crimson Dawn and everything, and
yeah, there's
um,
that too. But then he also does
yeah,
this little thing about taking the hyperdrive down from the inside and
yeah,
basically brings this cruiser down on his own.
yeah.
So,
I mean, he didn't even care. He was just
no.
taking stuff out. I mean, it was cool seeing Maul. Not having his lightsaber, so using the Force in different ways, using kind of his surroundings, and
Hmm.
just completely taking out the hyperdrive with the Force.
Yeah,
Um, Made for some pretty cool shots and action.
it did indeed. And like you said, some pretty cool shots, but this episode is pretty epic in scale.
hmm
Not just, I mean, we're talking about just finishing off every Clone Wars as a whole, but we're talking about, like I said, crashing a cruiser. Vader shows up later. Just all these huge moments. Did you have one standout moment?
Um, for me, it was absolutely Vader.
Okay.
At the end, just kind of, it was just a quiet moment. As much as it
It
was
was. It was very
epic and
quiet.
and
Yeah.
there was a lot of action, it ends in this very quiet,
It's very quiet,
very,
very reserved. Yeah.
yeah, this moment where it's very reflective
Reflective.
and
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Um, where he picks up that lightsaber and
Yep.
he ignites it, and then
Uses a
he seems
moray overhead,
to take him
the
with it.
bird
Yeah.
that follows
Um,
Ahsoka around.
hmm
Uh,
And he kind of takes the saber with him, which,
mhm.
yeah, I'm like, is that gonna show up again in some form of
Maybe
storytelling? I'm not
maybe
sure,
he's
but
adding it to his collection.
maybe it would make a fine addition to his collection.
Maybe.
Um, but yeah, that was my standout moment.
Yeah, I think mine has to is actually a lot earlier, and it's when Ahsoka and Rex are trying to figure out how to escape, and Ahsoka walks over and takes off Rex's helmet, and you see the emotion
Yeah, that was
coming
my
out of Rex.
that was gonna be my moment too.
That
It
really
was a
hit
very
hard.
close second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about action already, but what did you think about the action in this episode? We had a few big action scenes. We had Ahsoka and Rex trying to escape the cruiser, and we had
hmm
that with legions of stormtroopers. We had a pretty cool aerial fall scene as
Yeah.
well. Kind of mirrored the first episode in this arc, but in a little bit more of a chaotic way.
hmm
We had Maul doing everything that he does. Uh, how do you feel about the action so overall?
I thought there was a lot of great action in this episode. I already spoke about Maul and everything, but the only negative I found, it became just slightly redundant that there was kind of
I'm
a
glad
lot
you
of
said that. Yeah,
there was kind of a lot of deflecting with the lightsaber and like using the stun. And I know that they didn't want to kill any of the clones and everything,
which
but
I like that too.
yeah,
Yeah, I like that
um,
Ahsoka put her foot down there and said, "I'm not going to be the
right.
one that kills them."
Right, right, and that was a powerful moment for the
Yeah, yeah,
character.
yeah,
I did enjoy the droid's involvement in the hangar and everything,
yeah.
lowering and raising those platforms as a way to kind of, like you said, Ahsoka was refusing to kill the clones,
Yeah, I like
but
that
it
too. The raising and lowering platforms got to be a little bit silly,
like a little, yeah, it was a little silly. Yeah, I
which is
like the
okay. I
droids.
mean, ultimately, and we're gonna get into this quote a little bit later with Disney Gallery and stuff. But ultimately, I know that this is that I'm watching a show that I'm not really the main demographic for.
Right, right.
It's younger than me, and that's fine.
Yeah,
But the platforms was a little much here and there. And
yeah. I liked that
eventually,
the
I started.
droids.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like the droids were involved, but I agree with you
Yeah,
that it was a little silly.
and eventually, I started feeling like Rex. At one point, Rex sees a couple dozen more stormtroopers, and he just kind of here we go
Like,
again.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So yeah,
I
it
will
did get
say that
a
when
little
I
redundant.
the first time I watched this episode through, that didn't bother me at all. And then the
Mhm.
second and third times I've watched it, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
dragging a bit here, but
And, the when Ahsoka says that she's not gonna be the one that kills them, like, they might be willing to die, but she's not gonna be the one to do it,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Um, it kinda reminded me of Obi-Wan, like, I thought she was gonna say next, like, "But there are alternatives to fighting," or something like that, it reminded
That
me
would
of
have been a
that
nice
from A New
tie-in.
Hope.
That would have been a nice
Um,
tie-in. Yeah,
but I did like that about it. Now, I think my favorite action moment from the episode was actually the descent of this. I guess I'm just going to call it a star destroyer because that's basically what they become. Those ships,
yeah, yeah.
Republic cruise ships or whatever they are.
Hmm.
Um, but when it was like descending down to the planet, like some of those shots look like it could be in live action prequel movie.
Oh
It could have
man,
been.
yeah. Some of the
Um,
animation of, especially like you said, the cruiser just looked like
mhm,
it
yeah,
was beautiful.
and then like Ahsoka trying to get back onto, was it a Y-wing or some type of other ship that
I'd have to
Rex
check.
was on.
Yeah,
Um, I need a fact checker on that one, but just that whole moment of her trying to get back into that ship with him was cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That falling scene is probably my
Yeah,
favorite part
yeah.
of that episode as far as the action goes.
hmm
Uh, Pretty cool. You had already mentioned how much you like the end of the epilogue with Vader and how quiet it is. I first of all want to say I love the music in that as well,
hmm
and I don't
hmm
I on the outline I didn't specifically call out music, but this is a good place to mention it. I think uh, that the music not only just with the Vader ending, but with the Ahsoka ending where she's burying these troopers. Um, does for me, I think that was the perfect end. I think that just puts the period on it. I think it was well done. I think it was perfect. Does that put you at peace with how Clone Wars ends?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything else that I would have wanted out of it. The way that it tied into, the Revenge of the Sith and overlapped with some of those events, and like that was just, I didn't even know I wanted that, but that's what I
Yeah.
ended up wanting and really appreciating about this final arc. So I loved how it ended. I loved that the last moment was with Vader in the uniform, in the um, suit,
Yep.
and with the saber. So yeah, I loved it.
Excellent. Radio Rebellion in chat asks us a question. Do you think Ahsoka was ready to kill Maul right before he pushed her away? I think, given the chance, she would have done it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where obviously Ahsoka is opposed to killing if she doesn't have to, but
Yeah.
sometimes the Jedi do have to eliminate certain, like the Sith and thing characters like Maul and everything. So it's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say about the ending here before we go into the last part of this discussion is, for me, it's interesting. Have you read the Ahsoka novel?
I have not.
Okay, so this ending kind of directly contradicts what happens in that, which I'm actually fine with.
Hmm.
Um, in the novel, she actually buries a clone in Rex's armor to make it look like that's Rex's grave, and then she leaves her lightsabers there. So we got a version of that, and I
Right.
actually ended up preferring the version that we saw in this. I think that
Uh huh.
was really well done. Um, but that is a bit of a contradictory moment if you're looking at that strictly from a canon
Sure.
perspective. Uh, but I honestly ended up not minding that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really do like the way that it ended, and I
Yeah,
think sometimes we have seen things where whether it's in the film or in this case an animated series where that kind of supersedes something that maybe
yeah,
was in a book or something.
right. And then finally, as a whole, what are your thoughts on the Siege of Mandalore? Was it everything you wanted? Were there parts that left you wanting something just a little bit more? For
Hmm.
me, I know I was hoping to see a little bit more of Mandalore, maybe a little bit
Yeah.
more of Night of a Thousand Tears, things like that, which I really
Hmm.
didn't get much of.
Yeah.
We got a little bit about the citizens, and how they're not really liking the occupation of the Republic. We didn't get much beyond that. So I think for me,
Hmm.
if there's one critique, I think that was it for me, that I would have liked to see more of that aspect of it. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but beyond that, I mean, it's probably now my favorite arc of Clone Wars overall.
Hmm.
Period. So, but yeah, what about you?
I'm with you. I mean, I think the only thing that I was left wanting was a bit more Mandalore, the siege of Mandalore type of
Yeah,
stuff. Um, a lot of it focused, kind of on Ahsoka and Maul and their conflict and everything, which was great. But I think other than that, yeah, this was my favorite arc of the season for sure, and probably the entire series.
yeah, right there with you. So if you're hanging out in chat, let us know what you thought of the Siege of Mandalore as a whole, what you thought of this Victory and Death, the last episode, all of that. We'd love to hear it. But aside from that, we've got more Disney Plus stuff to talk about this week, because
Hmm.
this week also saw 2 episodes of the Disney Gallery, which is the Mandalorian documentary behind the scenes uh, series, I guess, mini
Hmm.
series. And so we have 2 episodes of that. The first came out on May 4th, on Monday, and that was the first episode was called Directing. And then we got a double dip on Friday with um, the second episode, which was called Legacy. And but going in order here, directing. I just want to say I loved how closely the directors worked together on this show. and I wasn't expecting that for some reason. Maybe because I'm used to film, where one movie got passed off to someone else, and you might hear about some lunch that directors had together or something like that. Um, but these these directors almost seem to be involved a lot in each other's episodes as a whole, or at least from the clips that we got in this episode.
Hmm.
Which I was surprised. I really liked that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it was very collaborative. I think you saw directors on the set of other directors' episodes, and things
Right,
like that. And
right.
I think that's really important. And I think, it was either John Favreau or Dave Filoni who kind of talked about that a little bit about how, um, the directors all had a common love for Star Wars,
Yeah,
and we're really excited about being involved in the project.
yeah, definitely. It's almost like a camaraderie there too.
Hmm.
You got the roundtable discussion and they're chatting there, but then you kind of see these clips of them hanging out and having a good time together and taking pictures together and all this other
Yeah.
stuff, and it was just really cool because I honestly didn't know that it was that tight knit as far as the
Me
directors
neither.
went. So
It kind of reminds me of how Marvel seems to conduct their, filming and everything, where
right,
the directors are involved in roundtable discussions a lot, and they're very collaborative, and they show up on each other's sets and stuff like that. So I
yeah,
like that.
yeah, definitely. So we start with Dave Filoni. As far as this episode seems to just kind of take you around. Like I said, there's a round table and just kind of goes around and kind of gives you each director's how they got started into this stuff, and kind of where their focus was on their episode or episodes that they directed. So we start with Dave Filoni, who gives this is prompted by Favreau to give his story about how he got into Lucasfilm, which I just laughed. You and I watched it together, but then I watched it again last night, and I laughed all over again because it's just a great story about how he got this call from Lucasfilm Animation, which didn't even really exist back then. And he's working at Nickelodeon. He thinks that the SpongeBob guys are leading him on, and how he's responding to this lady that calls him, and
Being very nonchalant and cavalier, like,
yeah,
oh,
right,
okay, so yeah.
yeah, kind of almost sarcastic, and then
Uh-huh.
he says it finally dawns on him that that she's actually for real,
Yeah.
and then she tells him he's the guy,
Yes,
and
I
he
am
says,
the guy for this.
"You have no idea how much the guy I am. I'm
It
building
was just
a Jedi robot in my garage right now."
right, right. That was
But
a
man,
fantastic story.
yeah, yeah. And But then moving on to Deborah Chow, she starts talking about how she got into working with zombies and aliens and things like that, and that led to bigger and bigger shows. And we get to
Hmm.
see how she directed. She had 2 episodes this season, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, she did.
And
Hmm.
then she's working on the Obi-Wan series,
Hmm.
and I loved both of her episodes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you're gonna have to help me with Rick's last name. Famuyiwa?
Famiua.
Okay.
Something like that. I think you nailed it.
Uh, I'm sorry, Rick, if I didn't. But he talks about the scale and about being on set and about how being there has that different feeling, um, which we heard Carrie Russell talk about that when she was in the Skywalker Legacy documentary. Being
Hmm.
on set, we can see these things for real and how you're actually there, and it feels so different. But Rick starts talking about how he was able to talk to Jawas because those are the only people he had to talk to, even though their Jawas, but it's just people. And
Yeah,
then
because that entire episode was
yeah,
just Mando, Baby
hmm
Yoda, and the Jawas,
Jawas,
and
right?
the Ugnaught. What's his name again? Queel.
Queel, yeah,
Um. So yeah.
yeah. And then I got a kick out of Favreau taking his episode 6 to Disney, and Disney says this is kind of weird,
Yeah,
which
that
it
one
was.
was kind of
Yeah,
weird. Those kind of
it was
rogue
very
characters
different.
that
Yep,
were in that episode
yeah, that was
were a
the
bit weird.
New Republic space station where they end up
Yeah.
rescuing the Twi'lek.
And it
But
kinda
yeah, that
turned
was
into,
a
like, a
different,
horror film
a little bit of a
at
horror, a
points,
little,
and
yeah,
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 yeah.
almost like an alien type.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was interesting. Uh, Bryce Dallas Howard, I loved watching her parts of both of these episodes. Actually, I hope we get to see more of her in season two. Hopefully,
Yeah,
maybe she'll be back.
I think
Definitely,
she
there's
is.
rumors that
Yeah,
there's
I think
definitely,
she's back.
yeah, there's definitely rumors
Mhm.
out there that she'll be back. So I hope so. Um, but she talks about sleeping through a meeting with her dad and George Lucas in Japan when she was 5, and just how that kind of stuck with her. Gina Carano calls her fierce, which what do you think of that? I never really get fierce when I think of Bryce Dallas
Yeah,
Howard, but I've
I
never
didn't
worked with her. But
right. I've never met her, but,
yeah,
yeah, I from what I've seen, like, I wouldn't get that impression of her being fierce, but when you watch her direct, you can kinda see that she definitely has a passion for it and, gets excited about it, and, yeah, maybe fierce is the word, I don't know.
yeah, and I don't know if she, Gina has says that she has this passion for the characters and stuff, and I don't know if that's maybe where fierce comes from, but um, yeah, I would like to see more of her directing and see how maybe
Mhm.
that connects, so. Taika Waititi is a very we've talked about him a little bit already, but he's a different guy.
Yeah, he's a different cat. He's interesting.
But it's interesting that I didn't know he was a painter. I don't know much about him beyond
Mm-mm.
before he did Thor. To be
Right.
honest, I know he had some other stuff that he did, and he talked about being in plays and doing kind of his writing his own stuff. And they showed some clips of, is it What We Do in the Shadows? I believe
Yeah.
is what that was called.
Mhm.
But he,
Mhm.
he he talks about asking, but he was actually a painter, which I didn't know. Um, which he says has helped him with composition and putting shots
Yeah.
together, and which makes total sense.
Mhm.
And he talks about asking Weta Workshop for some Lord of the Rings property checks, like some vampire ears that were elf
Right.
ears
I
that
mean,
didn't quite work out, or
he was working on a pretty low budget at that point,
yeah,
I'm
yeah, which I thought
assuming.
was funny.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy
Um,
Taika cracks me up, man.
Yeah, he does, and
He's
he
hilarious.
had that interview where he talks about the other directors and Bryce, and he's just I'm not maybe not the biggest fan, and it's just he's
Mhm.
not being serious, he's giving a fake interview type thing, but uh, I got a kick out of that. But then I pulled out two quotes here that kind of come up during the end of the episode, and they both are almost back to back. But Favreau says, we don't make fun of the action. And then Taika
Mhm.
says it doesn't take itself 100% seriously, but it does believe in itself.
Yeah, there's that quote. Yeah.
Right. Um, I thought those were two really great ways to think about comedy in Star Wars. And I don't think
Mhm.
that everyone that has done Star Wars in the past has quite gotten that balance.
Right.
But um, and it's not the same type of comedy that you see. Like it's not like even in Taika's episode, it's not the same type of comedy that he did in Thor.
Right.
Um,
It's definitely a different type of comedy. And if I
yeah,
do have one small complaint about the MCU, which I absolutely love, it's that sometimes I feel like there's a little too much comedy, like it doesn't take itself seriously enough, so it
yeah,
takes away
yeah,
from some of those emotional moments that you could have, or those powerful character moments. Like the next moment, it's something funny. Um,
right,
you know, after you have one of those serious moments, it's like there has to be something funny right after it in the
right,
Marvel movies. But I like that Star Wars has a different comedy, and this quote is
yeah.
brilliant. It doesn't take itself 100% seriously, but it does believe in itself,
And
and I
and
think
like you
that's what
said
I love
with
about Star Wars.
right, and like you said with Marvel, I tie that back to what Favreau said about we don't make fun of the action.
Hmm.
Something big happens, and like you said in Marvel, there is usually this joke about it.
Yeah.
Very quickly after. Um, but like Favreau said, we don't make fun of the action,
Hmm.
and Taika says, Star Wars believes in itself. It doesn't take itself 100% seriously though. So
Right.
very different approaches there, which
Yeah.
I like both of those quotes. I think those describe comedy in Star Wars pretty well.
Yeah, and I think if you look back to the Last Jedi a little bit with some of the comedy in there, some people felt like it was more of a Marvel comedy and didn't take itself quite seriously. Adam,
That's
you're
me.
one of
That's
those
me. Yeah.
individuals, and
Yeah.
some of that comedy did pull me out of it the first time I saw it. I mean, I got used to it, but yeah, I think there's a certain type of Star Wars comedy, that you have to
There
walk that
is.
balance.
And I always go back to that scene with Poe about the phone call and, can you
Yeah,
hear me
it's just a
now? I'm still on
yeah,
hold, that type of stuff. To me, that,
that
that,
isn't Star Wars comedy.
yeah, to me, that starts to make fun of the action, you know,
Yep.
and it
Yep.
starts to, maybe not believe in what we're seeing so much because, we're breaking that, wall down where
Right.
it's, this isn't we don't have cell phones in this galaxy. We're not on
Mhm.
hold. That type of stuff.
Yeah.
That's where it doesn't believe that it's Star Wars anymore. Now, I don't think that the comedy throughout Last Jedi was all bad, but that's
No.
the one
No.
scene that I always pick out
Yeah.
that just doesn't fit right for me.
Yeah,
So
because I think I don't. It's hard to capture what Star Wars comedy is, but I think it's a
yeah, yeah,
more sarcastic or
very
dry humor type of comedy. Sometimes at
right,
times, you know what I
right,
mean. Especially thinking about like Han Solo, that character in
yeah.
particular. But yeah.
So moving on to the second episode, which was called Legacy. We have a couple. Radio Rebellion. Before we do that, though,
Hmm.
says that he likes what Taika did with the last episode, but he doesn't think that the biker scout missing the shots was taken. He thinks that it was taken a bit too
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, I can see that where it kind of did make fun of itself a little bit. Yeah.
I can see
Hmm.
that too. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um. So John, we start with the Legacy episode. We start with John Knoll talking about the days leading up to Episode 1. And then Kathleen Kennedy jumps in and says that she doesn't think George ever stopped thinking about Star Wars, even when they were doing other things through the 80s and 90s,
Hmm.
like uh,
Indiana Jones
yeah,
and
I don't know how I was blanking on
yeah,
Indiana Jones,
yeah.
but
I was excited to see Kathleen Kennedy being a part of this
I
conversation.
was
Actually,
interested in that too. We start with
yeah,
John
we don't
Knoll,
see a
and
whole
then
lot of her. Yeah.
you don't see her until like a few shots into that, and then she's kind of off to the one side, and so oh boy,
Hmm.
Kathleen's here. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
almost called her Kathy,
despite
like like I hang out with her.
Kathy, hey Kathy Kennedy, yeah. No, but
Cat, what's up, Cat?
yeah, I think she gets a lot of criticism.
Yeah,
Maybe some of it's unfair. I
yeah.
think she's a great producer, and I think she was the right person, for George Lucas to go with to take over the company.
A lot of
I
people
think,
forget that she didn't take the company. George did hand that off to her.
yeah, he handed it to her,
That was
and
his pick.
he chose her, and for a reason. And now,
Hmm.
do I think there needs to be like a creative head of Lucasfilm as well as like yes, I do. I
I
think
think
somebody
that
like a Dave
whenever,
Filoni or
yeah, yeah,
a John Favreau needs to be
I
your,
think that's
you
coming
know,
down the road. I don't think that
yeah,
it's going to be a one person led company anymore.
right,
But
right.
that Kathleen's going to be here until she wants to retire.
Hmm.
It's not like she's not going to get fired, and she doesn't.
No,
You know.
no.
Um, Filoni drops a quote where he says, "I never saw Star Wars as something that was mine," which I thought that was really cool. And he
Yeah.
talks about how George would come in and course correct if something wasn't quite right. Um, but Filoni, he never saw it as something he had that ownership over. He's telling stories in a galaxy that's not his,
Hmm.
and he's
Yeah.
talks about how he was always, I guess, willing to learn from George. Whenever George had something to teach. So I loved how
Yeah.
much of a part George was of this episode without even being there.
Me too, because we have to remember who created all of this, and we have to keep in mind his vision. And I think Dave Filoni just respects George Lucas so much, and he was his mentor. And
Yeah.
Dave Filoni, I think more than any other person at this point that's still working on Star Wars, gets Star Wars more than anybody because he was George Lucas's Padawan, heir apparent to, you know, the Star Wars throne, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love when he talks about George.
Yeah. So speaking of George, it's kind of basically the first half of this episode because this episode is called Legacy, and it basically breaks down to two things: the legacy of George and what he started, and then kind of like our May 4th show, what is Star Wars? What does the whole thing mean?
Hmm.
But we start off with Kathleen. She talks about how George had created. We talk about both his George's advances in the story of Star Wars and the tech behind it. She mentions that when she stepped in, they had over 126 patents that George had filed for new tech, on his own, more or less. And they start talking
Mm-hmm.
about some of the things that he innovated, like a first CG character, the edit droid that Filoni mentions, which turned into Avid, motion control, computer graphics. Bryce Dallas Howard mentions, starts talking about Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just some really cool things that we don't always think about. ILM, which is part of all this, has just had their
Mm-hmm.
hands in so much stuff beyond
Yeah.
Star Wars. And then, when we take a break through the 80s and 90s and we come back, and then they're using all the stuff that they've learned and pushing boundaries even further with digital tech and things like that. Pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think George Lucas has always been so much about pushing the technology forward, and I think that's why we got the prequels that we did, and because he was trying to push the technology, and I think on the Mandalorian, John Favreau and Dave Filoni and all the crew there are trying to follow that model and push the technology forward using the volume and different and using miniatures and even creating new techniques. Um, so I appreciate that about this show.
Absolutely. But then we start getting in, like I said, Star Wars. What does it mean? Favreau and Pedro Pascal start talking about how Star Wars shaped their journeys. About how Pedro starts talking about, he remembers how he went to go see Return of the Jedi, and he remembers the poster that he saw.
Hmm.
And Favreau talks about how Star Wars is kind of like the central aspect of how he started on stuff. Um, Carl Weathers surprises me sometimes with how deeply
Yeah,
he talks about stuff.
yeah,
And I don't
absolutely.
know if it's because I love watching Arrested Development, where in
Uh huh.
Arrested Development he's in that show and he plays a washed up actor that just kind of swindles people out of money for acting lessons.
Right.
Um, but then he starts talking about how he reads Campbell, and he starts talking
Hmm.
about the hero's journey, and he goes so deep into that. And he talks about the quote unquote brilliance of Star Wars, and it just surprises me.
Same here. I loved hearing him talk about this and mentioning the hero's journey because I think the original Star Wars films you know, lightning in a bottle basically. and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how do you recapture that? I mean, the thing about Star Wars is the essence of it is using myths and the hero's journey and the coming of age story, and but putting it in space.
yeah.
And I think that's the essence of what makes Star Wars great, is these deeper themes and everything. And I think to recapture lightning in a bottle, you have to kind of go back to those basic things that were used. um the mythology, the hero's journey, the um coming of age story.
Yeah. And then Favreau drops this quote about how Star Wars is about teaching mythology, like you said, to those coming of age.
Hmm.
And we've talked before about this isn't really for us anymore. This is kind of for a generation that's coming of age. And you mentioned the hero story and about teaching them those aspects of mythology. Um, this honestly, this second episode I think was, I don't know how it gets better from here. you know,
Yeah, I love this
um,
second episode.
yeah, there were so many just emotional moments of that, and I know we're talking about the legacy, which is like an emotional topic in
Hmm.
itself. Um, but but man, some of these quotes Favreau's included there were just so good, so good.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned, like, maybe this isn't for us necessarily, but you know what I find? I find that even at my age, when I watch coming of age stories, I can still relate to them and I can still identify and still have this great appreciation. Like, I think Stranger Things comes to mind. And even though it's these younger kids, they're kind of coming of age and they're facing these
Hmm.
different monsters and things like that. But I connect with it because I remember being that age, and it's still something that I can appreciate and connect with.
Uh, I'm gonna go a little bit out of order here on the outline, just FYI.
That's okay.
I pulled out the about Deborah Chow talking about with Muppets and others. Um, but as far as being a director and looking at it from that point of view about getting a performance out of them. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get Dave Filoni just steals the show for the last like 5 to 7 minutes of this episode,
Yeah,
where he
absolutely.
starts talking about Star Wars is ultimately about family. Uh, he starts talking about how difficult the prequels were in terms of telling the story we've all thought about, but and then we see it on screen and it's not quite like we thought it was. Uh, about Qui-Gon being ahead of the council and realizing that the Jedi have lost their way. About Qui-Gon being a father figure for Anakin, and he loses his father figure
Mm-hmm.
in Episode 1. And Obi-Wan was more of a brother figure, so Anakin never really had that father figure,
Yep.
but then Anakin kind of becomes a father figure for Luke at the end, where he has to
Mm-hmm.
decide to become a father. Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
it's, it,
Filoni just basically gave a dissertation and a schooling on the entirety of Star Wars
he
in that
just
7 minutes. It was amazing.
and the
He was
way he
preaching.
yeah, and the way he describes it, and I wasn't ready for it, but it just kept going and going and
Mm-hmm.
going, and it was just like enraptured the whole thing as it's going on, and I could listen to Dave Filoni give a TED talk on Star Wars for
Yeah,
hours on end.
for sure. I
That was the
just
five
would love to
second.
hear more.
Yeah, that was the 5 minute bite sized version, but I could
Yeah,
listen to
yeah.
something 5 hours long like that.
Definitely. I also loved how he talked about the duel of the fates, and it really being,
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maul versus Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, but it really being the duel of Anakin's fate, because Qui-Gon so much believes in training Anakin and believes in him being the chosen one, and he'll do it without the council if he
Hmm.
has to. And like you said, he's more of that father figure to him. And Anakin and Obi-Wan lose Qui-Gon. And
Yeah.
so then Anakin's fate is very much determined by that saber duel. Um, and I'm not saying Obi-Wan failed him as a teacher or anything, but Qui-Gon would have probably been a different kind of teacher to Anakin and more of a father
Absolutely.
figure. So,
Okay, that's all the Disney Plus stuff. Unless you have anything else to add.
yes. No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, how about we jump into a Rise of Skywalker novelization talk?
All right.
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Okay, the Rise of Skywalker novelization's been out for a bit, and Josh said he just finished it up last week, but we already had
Hmm.
some stuff planned for last week, so we decided to make this week a review week, and we're going to throw in the Rise of Skywalker novelization here as well. We read this last month in our book club, and if you're not part of the book club and would like to be, we're reading Alphabet Squadron this month, and it's really good. Join along with us. Um, so let's start. Let's start with this, Josh.
Hmm.
Were there any confirmations in this novel you got that you felt you needed, and what were those?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I felt like I needed more of an explanation of how Palpatine survived, how he was transferred to this, if he was a clone or not, and we got those confirmations that I needed.
Yeah,
Um, just I think there was one point. Let me look through my notes and find it here. Um, it was something about how when he was, how the Emperor transferred his consciousness while he was falling down the
yeah,
shaft in
right,
Return of the Jedi. But the quote here is the secret place had not completed its preparations. The transfer was imperfect. The clone body wasn't enough.
right.
Um, just that explanation, I think I really needed, and I got that. So I was happy with that.
Yeah, I think about that too. I mean, that's probably the main one, right? That Palpatine
Hmm.
was a clone. But as I've thought about that more, and as I've read other people talking about that more, I was okay. I think with what ended up showing up in in the movie.
Hmm.
I think there was enough there
Yeah.
to lead me down that road anyway.
Hmm.
From Beaumont kin to blatantly saying cloning and all that dark sciences
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Um, that line is there for a reason. Uh,
I guess I
and then
just wonder.
Palpatine saying he's died before.
Yeah, he's that. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So for
you know,
me,
sometimes the story, sometimes films or stories require you to fill in some of the gaps,
yeah,
which is
yeah, and
fine.
that's what I'm
I
saying.
guess.
And like for me, this is there for me to enhance that, and
Hmm.
so I don't feel. I know some people feel cheated by that wasn't in the movie. I don't feel that
Yeah.
way.
Right.
Um, but it was nice to see it there. Not only that, but to have you see the Palpatine son was a clone of him
Hmm.
that didn't go the way he planned.
Right. Yeah.
So
I just wonder like how if people that aren't as invested in us in looking into these things and reading these novels, how they felt about that. You know what I mean?
I
About
don't know
Palpatine just being
because
back all of a sudden. You
I
know.
don't think that that's a big deal. I really don't.
Hmm. Right.
I think it feels natural that the main villain through the first 6 movies really is back again to be the main villain and to
Hmm.
wrap it all up. I think that's poetic in a way. I think that's I think that's a pretty easy jump to make. I keep thinking about Lord of the Rings where Sauron is back. How is
Yeah.
Sauron back? The spirit of Sauron endured, and that's all we need to know. You know,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
we don't. We know that the ring is part of that, but we don't know how he transfers his soul into the ring, or
Hmm.
how the ring keeps him alive, or bound to Earth, or Middle Earth, or any of that stuff. All we get is that the spirit of Sauron endured. You know,
Yep. Yeah. I
and
mean,
that's been
I still don't
enough
know. I still
through.
don't know how I feel about Palpatine in Episode 9. I really don't. I'm still really just not sure how I feel about it. But I've grown to accept it more. I think overall.
I love it, and that's actually honestly that's actually my favorite Palpatine movie.
Hmm.
Is him in this movie.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if it's the scenery. I don't know if it's the makeup. I don't know if it's
Hmm.
all that stuff put together. But this is my favorite Palpatine movie.
Yeah.
So, um,
I, I had another
we
couple
talked. Oh, go for it. Yeah,
minor
go for it.
confirmations. One was I was kind of confused by the whole Ochi storyline
Oh,
in the
okay.
movie,
Yeah.
but I felt like the novelization kind of filled in some of that. One thing I wasn't sure of was like the blade that had the inscription on it and
Mm-hmm.
how to find the wayfinder. I was like, wait a second, like who made this thing, this dagger, and who put this inscription on here, and
Mm,
how do you like? Because it had to have been done after
yeah.
the Death Star crashed, the ruins crashed into the ocean, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see like where it was.
Yep.
And then finding out that Ochi was the one who inscribed it
Yeah.
on the blade just kind of made that make more sense to me.
Yeah.
Was another thing, yeah.
Were there we touched about the touched on this a little bit. Was there anything you think that you needed to be in the film, or was this novel mainly like nice extra content that added to your experience?
I think most of it was extra that just
Okay.
added to the experience, but I feel like I did need more of an explanation of Palpatine
Okay.
being alive in the movie. I felt like that was missing.
Okay. Um. Yeah, I've been trying to think if there's anything I needed, and I can't really come up with anything. Uh,
Hmm.
most of these were just kind of nice, like aha moments. But I can't come up with specific things that I actually really needed to be in the novel itself, in the movie itself.
Yeah. I
Um,
feel like one other thing I could have really maybe needed in the film, more wanted than needed, but still, Luke's presence. Luke having more of a presence. He has more of a presence in the
he
novel,
does, he
um, and
does.
I would have liked to have seen that in the Rise of Skywalker, because the Last Jedi kind of indicates that Luke's going to be around. He says, to Kylo Ren, "I'll see you around, kid," and stuff like that. And it just seems like Yoda's teaching him he needs to pass on what he's learned again to Rey. Um, and so I felt like the story almost mandated him to have a bigger presence than it did.
Yeah, a lot of that presence was with Leia,
Hmm.
which
Yeah, it kind of
I
transferred to Leia, which is cool. I mean,
which
I
I
like that Leia
know.
trained Rey and everything.
Yeah, and I know that really couldn't happen. I think they did all they could really do with Leia,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, yeah. I was very happy with Leia's
yeah, for
involvement.
sure. And you hear interviews about how they actually kind of wanted to do more with Leia, and it just didn't work right. Lighting didn't work right or whatever it was. It just
Mhm.
didn't look right. Um, but Luke does have some extra moments with Rey on Octo, which would have been nice. There's a little bit more of a conversation there about
Yeah.
about some things. Um, so I don't know. The one thing I remember from this novel, and I don't know that I needed this in the film, but I loved how Leia's three names kind of get transferred and almost owned by the three main characters, with
Mhm.
Skywalker going
Yeah.
to Rey, Organa, the political aspect of that goes to Poe, and then the
Mhm.
Solo legacy goes to Ben.
To Ben, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that as well. It's very poetic.
yeah, agreed. So, but like I said, I can't think of anything that I really needed to be in the film. Um,
Mhm.
did you have any favorite moments in this novel, and did they differ from anything that happened in the film in any way? Did any of these like maybe happen just a bit differently, or did the explanation of it help you at all? Um,
Mhm.
what do you think?
Yeah, there's definitely a few that I pulled out here, if
Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah, go for it.
One, of course, is Luke's presence.
Mm,
Just Luke kind of reaching out to Leia through the Force throughout the novel, um, especially in that final moment where she's about to sacrifice herself, basically to save Ben. You know, to kind
mm-hmm,
of get him to turn to the light side. Um, I thought it was just an interesting thing learning that Ray healing the Vexus had
mm-hmm.
this impact on her
On her,
on her
yeah.
hand,
And you see
and
that in the
so
movie, but it never until I read the novel, it never really kind of she's kind of flexing her hand a bit, and
yeah,
it
and the
never really
lightsaber duel.
landed that why. Yeah, yeah,
Right, I didn't know why her hand was hurting, but now it makes sense. I thought that
right.
was neat. Um, I loved the interrogation scene between Kylo and Chewie, and how Ben used to call him Uncle Chewie and
Yeah.
everything. I thought that was cool. Just seeing more moments with Chewie being connected to Kylo Ren and Ben Solo.
Hmm.
Um, I really loved, because I think there was even a moment where Lando was kind of reflecting in the Falcon,
Yeah, yeah,
and he sees this hologram
yep,
of like Chewie holding Ben or something like that.
yep.
Um, and um, let's see. It was interesting how Ben got off of Octo, or not Octo, off of Kef Burr, because we really didn't know. And I guess
Mm,
he found an
yeah,
old TIE fighter that was
right.
in like the hangar or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Um, I loved that the Ghost, Inferno Squad, and Kaz all showed up at the
I
battle
was
in
gonna
the
pull that up.
novel.
Yeah.
That was cool. Um, and I just loved about Ben's kind of voice through the Force saying to Ray, "I'll always be with you,"
Right.
and Ray saying, "No one's ever really gone."
Yeah, I think maybe that might have been good to put in the movie.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
that would have taken up too much screen time. We're talking about
hmm
seconds. I think that would have been a good thing to include. I had a couple also. I liked the explanation that a dyad is like a light side rule of two, and that
yeah,
Palpatine tried to
yeah,
create a dyad with Anakin that never really worked for him.
hmm yeah. It was cool learning more about the dyad thing.
Right. I like finding out that Lando's mission after this is going to be helping kids displaced by the Force First Order.
Yeah,
I thought that was
definitely.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, there was a quote there in the last chapter, and I think that this kind of encapsulates a lot of feelings. But maybe the good people of the Resistance didn't care about nonsense like bloodlines and family history.
hmm
And a lot we talk about the bloodlines and the family history, and this movie is still about that.
Right.
And I liked getting that confirmation in the novel.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned all the squads showing up: Ghost, Alphabet, Inferno, Kaz, and the Fireball. Um, those were all pretty cool. I
hmm
loved the scenes with Ben, where he decides to save Ray, and he says that was
Yeah,
that was the easiest decision he's
easiest
ever made.
decision he's made. Yeah.
He had no regrets about doing any of it. It was his way of doing good for all the evil that he'd done, and then like you mentioned, Ben will always be with her. So
I loved how in the novel it said that it wouldn't atone for the darkness he'd wrought, but it
right,
was what he could do.
yeah.
You know, he's not fully redeemed, by this thing that he does in the end, but it kind of
Well, I think he. So that's a big conversation there.
it is a larger
I think he
conversation.
is redeemed. I think his actions aren't. He doesn't erase his actions there, but I think as a person, I think he is redeemed. I think he is
Right.
fully redeemed.
And I think just knowing that he couldn't do what Ray could do in the future,
Right.
being because of the things that he's done and the galaxy's view of him, he had to give his life to Ray to be a Jedi and to pass everything on, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, what were your overall impressions of the novel?
I really enjoyed this novelization. I think it was
Yeah, it's one of the better novelizations I've read.
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love how it expanded on different things and gave us a lot more details. And even at times the novelization is just pretty much beat for beat with what's happening with the movie, which
Hmm.
is cool. Um, but then it also really expands on it and has those extra extended scenes and everything. So I enjoyed it. And I think we finally got that answer by the end of what Finn was going to tell Ray, because it's never really resolved in the movie. And we find out that he was definitely going to tell her that he's force sensitive.
Yeah, yeah. It was nice. It was nice getting that
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah, like I said, I think this is one of the better novelizations I've read, and I think Ray Carson did an excellent job on it. Novelizations for me are always a little weird because the author's not really writing their story; they're writing a story that's already been written for them. And there's
Right.
some places there that, just like every novelization, I think I can tell that that's the case.
Hmm.
But aside from that, I thought it was a wonderful adaptation of the script. So
Agreed. I really enjoyed it.
cool. That's the last review. We got through the extravaganza. Are you ready to wrap up episode 28?
Yeah, this was a big show. Let's take it to a conclusion.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Thank you again for tuning in. If you were here live, we want to thank you too. We saw Pizza and Parsecs, Mr. Rez, Stephen Miller, and Radio Rebellion all hanging out with us on this cold, snowy Saturday in May. Thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you again next week. Remember, if you are listening live or if you're listening without and you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that. We're on most major podcatchers, including iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, everything like that. If you are on a platform like iTunes that lets you review, drop us a review. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear it. That also helps us get out to more people as well. Remember to check out the website from a certain point of view.com. I've been a little busy this week. It's been a quiet week on the website, but that will be kicking back into gear this week. Check us out on socials. Twitter is @certainpovpod. Facebook is From a Certain Point of View. The Discord server, that's where we do our book club as well. That link is in the show notes and it's on the website. Email is certainpovpod@gmail.com, and we are hosted by anchor.fm, where you can find us there and leave us a voicemail that we can play on the show if you have a question or a show topic idea or anything you'd like to hear on the show. If you want to just get your voice out on the interwebs and make your opinion heard, anchor.fm is a great way to do that. You can find me on Twitter at thegauze85, where I do all my other shenanigans throughout the week. I also write a few articles a month for farfarawaynews.com, and we'll have another one of those coming out next week, I believe. Josh, what else do you do on the internet? Where can good listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at JediJarJar1722 and writing articles for Movie News Net and Star Wars News Net.
Awesome. All right, that wraps up episode 28. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We hope to see you next week. Josh, you
Yeah,
want
thank
to
you
take us out of
guys.
here?
Thank you guys so much for joining us today, whether it was in the chat or listening later on the podcast. And we just appreciate you guys. We hope you had a great May the 4th, and we look forward to interacting with you again soon. And until then, everything we told you today was true.
From a certain point of view. All right.
All right, sir.
Mm.
That was a lot.
Yeah. But it only worked out about an hour and 10 minutes, so that's not too
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to
I
figure
saw
out
that
Mother's Day.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing about that either.
I need to go to Walmart. I don't want to.
We went last night. It wasn't too bad.
Did you go in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna try it. I gotta get something for my mom, and I think I'm gonna cook dinner tomorrow and stuff. But
Cool.
what
Yeah.
do you got? What do you got going on?
That's really the only major thing I have to do, I think. So,
Yeah.
and then tomorrow we are going over to, I think, both parents, just to see them and,
Yeah, I think my mom's gonna come over here
Okay.
and hang out, and I'm trying to put together a video thing for Brittany with a
Gotcha.
bunch of videos of Sydney that we've taken over the past few years and everything.
That's a good idea. Really the only. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
But hey, man, it's been great, and
Yep.
we'll have to get together soon, hang out, watch a movie or something.
Sounds good to me.
Try to get together with the crew as well. So,
Yeah.
all right, sir.
All
Well, have
right.
a great weekend, and I hope Mother's Day goes well for you guys. And tell Denise
Thanks,
I
you
said
too.
Happy Mother's Day.
Okay. Give my same to Brittany.
Will do. See you, buddy.
Later. All right, chat. I think we're gonna call that a show today as well. I got a lot bigger there. Thanks everyone again for hanging out. And we do this Saturdays 2 p.m. Eastern, so we'll be back at it next Saturday. But until then, may the force be with you.